All right, how's everybody doing? My name is John Brisson. Welcome to another We've Read the Documents live stream. Today, I have with me esteemed guest LB Bork from packinlaw.us, and he wrote an excellent book, The Red Amendment. Are you there, Mr. Bork?
You cut out for a minute, but you're back.
Yeah, sorry, having a little bit of production issues. Had major storms yesterday that
Ah,
came out of nowhere. So today, Mr. Bork and I are going to discuss the census, especially the modern census, and how the census has evolved from what it originally was just counting how many people live in the domicile for which you live in, to, if anybody has done theirs for 2020, asking some very personal, invasive questions to try to gain as much data as humanly possible on you so the state can control you. So, Mr. Bork, you wrote a PDF on the farce of the 2010 census, which was the
yes.
last census that we had in this country. So why don't we go? Actually, why don't we start with the census in and of itself and how it evolved into the census that we have today?
Okay. I'm pulling up the document. I'm a little slow tonight myself. Not saying you are, but
I know.
we're all a little slow.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. I'll go ahead and start real quick. So,
Yeah,
there is a part.
I've got it up. So.
Okay. There is a part in the United States Constitution which is very vague, that talks about a 10-year census, that it would just be used for direct taxes and for the amount of representatives, for it to be done every 10 years, just to keep a count of head of who lives in a house. And it's very vague in how they write it. They write representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years, and after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, with every subsequent term of 10 years. So they didn't even really say that you have to go within your state to be counted person by person. It's just the states have to have a tally that they give the United States government of how many people live in a specific state, so that taxes can be taken and the number of representatives can be assigned to said states.
Correct.
And the first census, of course, was after the American Revolution. It was taken in 1790 under the Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson, and they've done it every 10 years since then. So over the period of time, of course, with everything that happens with the federal government, things become more and more and more and more and more and more complex. I mean, look at the tax code, after all. Of course,
Yes.
Mr. Bork, you and I have discussed that if we really went back to how things should be, it should be local state sales taxes. If that, they could be put on by the state. And it should go to like an excise tax, and it should go back to tariffs instead of having a federal income tax, which was how this country was initially founded and how we funded ourselves. So just like the tax system in the United States, the census system in the United States too as well has become extremely complex and evasive.
Yes, it's part of the program, the progressive program. How deep do we want to get into the foundation or the beginnings of what has gone on here?
Go ahead. You can go start. You can start and try to get deep.
Yeah, it's like maybe a rerun of some of the other shows we've done or presentations. I like to call them presentations rather than shows, because show pretty much speaks to entertainment, and definitely I know you're really not here to entertain people. You're here to educate, as I am. So
Yes.
anyway, yeah, so talk radio. People are there to be entertained for the most
Shock
part.
jocks.
Shock jocks and things like that, yes. Just part of my, I don't know, belief system and how I operate. When I set out with People's Awareness Coalition, it's been 22 years ago already, I plan to make political change, and that's basically the foundation that I kind of mentioned that has to be talked about. If people aren't aware, you and me were talking before the podcast tonight about
Yes.
Switzerland and how things kind of progressed into the United States, but
How the American founders loved the loosely Swiss Confederation,
Right.
and the Swiss Constitution, and how many people are unaware that our republic and our constitution is based off of Switzerland. So
Yes. The interesting thing about Switzerland, it's where Reformation took place, and that was the reforming of the Catholic Church. Basically, I looked at, I don't know if you might agree with me, but there were two reformists. There was John Calvin and, of course, Martin Luther.
yes, yes,
Okay. I think Martin Luther was more of a true reformist. I think Calvin was probably a agent provocateur,
in my
or
opinion too as well. I'm not a Calvinist.
okay, good. He went to Switzerland to write the Geneva Bible.
Yes, yes, he did.
So there's a lot of things that have gone on in Switzerland. The Club of Rome today is there, which I think was formed in the 1970s sometime. And a lot of your listeners probably heard all roads lead to Rome.
Yes.
They truly do. The law system that governs the Western cultures, so-called civilization, is basically Roman civil law. So when Calvin went to Switzerland, they had some, I don't know, theories or principles that they laid down that they believed in.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main principles was that anywhere the Catholic Church or the Vatican had situs and controlled that area or jurisdiction, they could basically control people with civil law. So, as you know, the Jesuits took place or inserted themselves into the Vatican in the 1500s also. So this progression of this plot, involves not only I believe the Jesuits are from the Synagogue of Satan. Of course, I think the Vatican was infiltrated earlier, back when it was formed.
Yes, some people do say that about Ignatius Loyola.
Right.
Even though I do disagree, but some people do have that belief that it was infiltrated by almost that the Jesuits was a crypto Christian society. Even though I've seen back and forth, I know Michael Joseph has talked about it and given it back and forth too as well. But I didn't mean to override your train of thought, though, Mr. Bork. I apologize.
No, that's fine. Do you know Michael Jones?
Yeah, but I'm not a fan of you, Michael Jones.
No, I'm not either. So I don't trust him.
I don't either.
Anyone with the Vatican or believes in so-called Christianity, I really don't trust. And that would include Brother Nathaniel.
Yes, I'm not a fan of Brother Nathaniel Kapler either, who never calls out Russia and
Right.
believes that Putin is the savior of the world with Trump.
Right.
Even though he does call out Trump and Kushner, I guess it's more Putin. But yeah, I don't trust Kapler reforming as an Orthodox Christian, supposedly. I do not.
Okay,
So.
good. Because that's pretty much where I'm at. Even though he does a great job in exposing, the Zionist faction in a lot of cases.
Yeah, but I'm afraid it's one-sided, and I think that he's a shill for. I still think Russia, since the czars were run out, is pretty much communist even to this day, which I
Yeah.
guess could be a very simplistic way of looking at it. But it's a return more to the communal ways that Alexander Dugin wanted with the Eurasian people in Russia, and the czars were more of your kind of like your Asian European Christian type Russian rulers, which is not what we have today in Russia. So
Right. If you look at the Russian architecture of their churches, it much resembles the Muslim, or back to things that happened in Egypt. So there's a lot of ties there. Even
yes,
their garb looks like the Sadducees, maybe, or the Pharisees of Roman time.
and you can go back and look too as well that it seems a lot of Babylonian influence.
Right.
Which I know we're getting off on a tangent, but
Well, we're laying foundation here
yes,
for
yes.
kind of where we're going with the census, but
But the Geneva Bible also was the groundwork for the King James version.
Right.
which heavily borrowed over off of the Geneva Bible. Now, I'm not King James only myself. I read both the King James and the New American Standard Bible. I wish I knew Kanye Greek, but it's very interesting. Many Christians don't know that Sir Francis Bacon and also John Dee. John Dee had a relation with King James, and so did Sir Francis Bacon. It's possible that Sir Francis Bacon, the Luminist, was one of the people that helped translate and put together the King James version of the Bible.
Mm.
And in the original manuscript layout from that was the Geneva Bible. And of course, its ties to Switzerland, Geneva, Switzerland as well, where a lot of the Protestant scholars fled to England. I mean, from England to Geneva, Switzerland under King Mary
Right.
the First. So yeah, I am a Protestant myself, but I do understand that there might have been some Illuminati subversion, to or lack of a better word, put into some of the Protestant beliefs that were, especially something like the doctrine of election that you see in Calvinism, which not even Calvinist himself would have been a Calvinist, as some people argue. But I
Yeah.
digress.
Yeah. Marx said he's not a Marxist either, which I thought was weird.
Yeah.
I, these people will say things and you really don't know what to talk about. But I think him saying that in whatever context it was kind of like a tacit statement of saying it was for the Goyim. Marxism's for the Goyim. Is what
Yeah.
he was saying.
Yeah, and I could see that with. I mean, I do think Martin Luther, even though he did have some faults too as well, with him talking about sin boldly. And I have some questions about Martin Luther because Martin Luther used to say that he used to talk with the devil often.
Hmm.
I do think he was genuinely trying to reform the church, and I do believe that it's possibility that Jews at that time were trying to get him to kind of form like his canon and kind of whispered in his ear about a lot of things,
Hmm.
and that's why Calvin eventually wrote on the Jews and their lies. Not Calvin. Martin Luther eventually wrote on the Jews and their lies, which kind of went all the way, to the extreme in my opinion. But he at least could tell that there was some version going on with Christianity with the Jews when he was trying to get the basis for the Septuagint in the Old Testament, as far as the Protestant beliefs in those. So I do like Martin Luther more than I like John Calvin.
Right.
But I still, even though I'm a Protestant and I don't want to be a Catholic because the Catholic Church is completely corrupt, and I don't want to be an Orthodox because I don't trust the Orthodox Church either. I still can understand some criticisms of Protestantism that instead of reforming the church, which I believe Martin Luther wanted to do, the church was scattered into a million pieces.
Yes. Anyway, I think I mentioned that I believe the Sadducees, after their temple was destroyed in Rome, they
Hmm.
probably conspired to create the Catholic Church, or the church as I call it. But that's speculation. I haven't done deep research. Matter of fact, you're probably more versed than I am on a lot of things, as you just related.
I
I
have some inklings too that then with the Romans co-opted early Christianity to some degree.
hmm
But I mean that's
Oh,
a
they
discussion for
definitely
another.
did.
That's another
Yeah,
discussion for
that's
another show.
that. But anyway, up till the 1500s, we see a progression of what would be called the New World Order, if you will. So it brings us up to the 1700s, and the French Revolution was basically the first revolution or takeover of a country under the French,
Yes.
and they instituted socialism by force. This is before they had the Communist Manifesto written, which was written by supposedly Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, who was a Jew. They were both Jews, and
Yes.
my position or belief is the based on what I've studied about Marx is the Industrial Revolution was all planned, and anything that is a revolution is basically saying that the same people who controlled things for long before they took over a country, to get them to revolt was basically saying the revolving part was the same people basically controlled it, be it the church or finances or whatever. But the evolution was to come into socialism, which was the foundation for communism. Do you follow there?
Yes, I do. Go ahead, Mr. Bork.
So anything that's a revolution is going to be based on the New World Order or world communism, as I call it today, is because that's what they call it. Some of my research took me to the U.S. Code in Title 8, which deals with nationalities and immigration. And basically, I think they put it in there as kind of I don't know, indicator that there's a threat of this going on, but it didn't appear into the U.S. Code in the U.S. Code until like the 1900s, mid 1900s, almost 1940s, and communism was already installed into the United States during the Civil War. So, just like the whole congressional body is today, it's ignorant is anything, so they were ignorant back then too. So anything that happened in the 1900s with Jesuit trained McCarthy, for example, was just a dog and pony show to take people off course of figuring out that America was already communist. So they're used this communist threat in the 1900s.
Joseph McCarthy and Roy Cohn being Trump's mentor. So
Yeah. So, just like the Who said, the new boss is the same as the old boss. No, nothing's changed. Any revolution or change in government is going to be these same people, which I call the shadow government. Okay, this some people think the shadow government and the deep state are the same thing. They're not.
yeah.
Deep state to me is just another distraction to keep people off course of what's really going on, and create some bad guys that they can point the finger at. But really, these guys that are running things are the problem overall.
And some of the people that are within the shadow government, we may never know their names.
Right.
The deep state is more, look at what the liberals are doing. The liberal deep state, the progressive deep state, but don't look at the people on the right who are also guilty as well in all the crimes.
They're really guilty. I mean, the Republican Party was formed by rich industrialists, and they're the actual Communist Party. That all happened during the 1800s. I'm living in the communist state of Wisconsin right now. Was granted statehood the same year the Communist Manifesto was released. A bunch of people came over from Europe after they got tried for sedition. Some of the Marxist cohorts and him got basically tried for sedition, and a lot of the people came over here to start up things. And the Republican Party was started in Ripon, Wisconsin, in I think 1953, about 5 years after Wisconsin was granted statehood, and these people came over here. So there's your foundation for the Communist Party. They flipped to the Democrats. There's this idiot called Dinesh D'Souza, who's trying to tell people that the Democrats were bad slave owners and whatever, but they were mostly farmers and people that Jefferson thought should run the United States, as far as the people, they were agricultural type people, or agrarian, as he called them, or they're called. So that's where we need to get back to. So anyway, back to the census.
So I guess to round up, the birthplace of the GOP being Ripon, Wisconsin in 1853. It was a lot after the French Revolution. A lot of the Europeans coming over here. A lot of your Jacobins, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
So the Republican Party or what they call conservatives, aren't really conserving anything.
Yes.
They're not. So so that's where So to get back to the census, the United States, at least has the power from the Constitution to have, like we mentioned earlier, for the states to count and report their population.
Right.
It has gone way overboard from that.
Yes. And so the listeners know I just got into this back in the 90s, so my studies aren't as deep as my friend Mike Gaddy, who has done this for 40 years. He knows a lot of the same things I do, and he started writing about Marxism in the United States. The last 10 years, he's done quite a few articles on it. So we're on the same page on a lot of different things as you and I are, John, or you and myself, rather.
Yeah, it's so when the census changed. So we'll talk about the 2010 census that you had mentioned. And there's a controversy, if I remember at that time, about counting illegal immigrants in the census too as well during that time period too. Or am I confusing something?
I don't know. That's the first time I noticed it. Noticed it is when I looked at the 2010 because of Obama. He said some really goofy things, and I think I looked at the current one, and it's backed off a little bit on this socialist, obvious socialist, no border position
Yeah, the
that
2010
Obama
census,
has
the
had.
2010 census counted people who were in the United States illegally.
Right. Yeah, we can read that from the article I had written if you'd
Yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah. I remember you talking about it and looking at it. So they wanted to count all
It,
United States resident citizens and non-citizens alike.
right, that's what they said on the website.
And the bears repeating before we begin a new chapter in American history. The 2010 census aims to count all United States citizens and non-citizens alike. So, like and the question is, what are we beginning, and what does Obama think he is doing? Like, why are we counting non-citizens? The census is to count for citizens,
Yeah,
and then you find out if there's non-citizens living in a household, they get deported. I mean, it's that simple.
that's
So
right. Well, plus, how can you get an accurate count? They might have counted citizens and just counted them for representation, but it seems like to me that you know, how can they really tell who it is? You know,
yeah,
uh,
you're
and
right.
plus they're saying U.S. residents. Uh, as a matter of law, residents a thing, and that's a term that they use to basically uh, control. Getting back to this whole program of slavery under world communism, I looked at. I went back all the way to the Law of Nations by Vattel,
Yes.
and the French translation or the French version basically said that people who weren't citizens of a country, which in the United States would be each state, and that's how the Constitution was set up. Uh, Technically, that's what they built, but that's all messed up too. There's conspiracy behind that. But it called non-citizens inhabitants, and when we got to the Carnegie edition that was put together in the 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
they changed that term to resident. And I did research on that term, and it really didn't exist. Inhabitant means someone that's just inhabits a place, right? There's really no legal connotation or extraction that can be made from that except a man or a woman living somewhere, right? Just like a lizard lives in the desert, correct?
Yes.
So resident means res in law means thing, okay? And ident is basically identity, the thing identity. So what they've done with this language is create the legal fiction or the belief that the everyone in the world is a slave. So basically, because of the money system and all that, what they've done, they've presume everyone owes them money, which they don't because they didn't agree to it. And that goes deeper into the the bowels of the Constitution and how they set things up to just really enslave everyone with that document.
Yeah, Lizzie D asked in the chat, or said in the chat, and asked, "What's the point of the point of the census? There are birth and death records as well as new citizenships. What does the census attempt to capture?" And there is some truth that I even think about that,
Yeah,
where
it's a good question.
yeah, the states could report births and deaths to the state, to the government, and citizenship requests too as well. Um, and I guess you could report how many people are in your household. But yeah, I mean, what exactly does? I mean, the census is more than just that now. When you fill it
Right.
out, it's asking you. It's asking you your college education history, information about your kids. Did they claim, well, it's for the school system? Oh dear Lord, think of the children. Where do you work? How often do you go to work? Like none of that is not what this was designed for. They say it's for, to help with city planning and state planning and all this other stuff. But
That's socialism, communism,
and 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 it,
straight out.
and in doing so, it's supposed to help. And look, I mean, if the states wanted to ratify something where they took down this data or something or whatever, then fine. But the federal government of itself doing it is extremely suspect. And so instead of them getting a count of who is in the United States or who is in state by state, which I understand that does serve a purpose and a basic framework, it's gone more towards trying to find out everything in 10 years about their life, your life, that you can volunteer to them. But then again, with the technology that we have now, and everything is tracked by the GPS on our cell phones and everything, it's not like they don't know this information already. It's silly.
I think it's part of that consent to the governed principle that they
Yeah.
set up under the Declaration of Independence. They need everyone's consent. I took my census for this year, and I got a stamp that says refused for legal cause, and stamped it and sent it back to them. I'm not filling it out.
Yeah, I did, but I only
Because,
filled out what I believed to be necessary or deemed to
yeah, there's a
be.
lot of people that do that.
I had my uncle, look at it, and he was like, "Yeah, they can't really come after you for the stuff that you don't want to fill out here." And I'm not giving anybody advice. I'm not telling anybody to do it or anything like that. But you don't have to fill out every single line that they want you to fill out. So, you know.
Well, my argument is there's no section under Article 1, Section 8 that allows them to take the census.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That gives the powers to Congress. And Mike Gaddy has brought up the necessary and proper clause, but, which would go back to, well, we need to count for representation. Well, I don't want to be represented because, for one thing, the 14th Amendment totally changed the political atmosphere of the Union. And basically, Section 2 of the 14th Amendment says it's a crime to vote. And that's how they got... If you look at the Communist Manifesto, again, it was written in 1848 and released on the world. And by the way, Switzerland is still the only neutral state in the world, or neutral country.
Yes, they are, and we talked about Switzerland earlier too. And
right.
It's very interesting about the formation of the United States and everything. So it's very interesting that they are still neutral in all of this, but no one ever talks about them, and they have no power to most people.
Right.
So it'd be very interesting that you think a neutral state. Well, what is a neutral state? It's someone who is supposedly able to, by their neutrality, make rules of what other countries do, and other countries can, go and.
Well, it's a safe haven also.
Yes, it is. I was about to get to that.
They're not involved. A manifesto is a declaration of war by a so-called entity or a sovereign people. That's international law. And the Communist Manifesto is basically a declaration of war by the Zionist faction course, they didn't exist until the late 1800s. But the same people created this economic war on the world. And what it did is destroy and change all the economies of the world to basically do two things. When I looked at the Communist Manifesto, I said to myself, this thing is meant to, one, create a workforce out of all the so-called lower class and the middle class, because what it was doing with the middle class is just destroying them and taking their businesses away from them and putting them on an equal footing with the lower class. And the other thing that I noticed was the ruling class, as Marx called them, or the elite, weren't a problem. The middle class was. So that was obvious to me what this thing was doing. It was taking all the wealth of the middle class and enslaving them and the lower class and putting all the profits into the hands of the elite. And if you look at Congress today, who's got all the money?
Yeah.
They're giving it to the multinational corporations
They're-
and themselves.
yes. Yeah, and I mean, and Waldo Udowski said in the chat, as a former census manager, all they really want is a number of people. They keep coming back for non-response follow-up until you do, unless you point a gun at them. Brandishing one won't do it. I don't recommend pointing a gun at them, but I do agree with them that that's all they really need by what was given to them in the Constitution is just how many people live in your household and their names. And that's
that section changed under the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
And here's my position. I changed my nationality over 20 years ago now. And Section 2, like I said, says it's a crime to vote. So the people voting are criminals because they're rebelling against the original constitutional principles. And 2, I don't have to be associated with criminals, which Section 1 of the 14th Amendment makes them federal citizens. So they're associated with the criminals that are voting. So I don't have to be associated or represented by these criminals.
Yeah, and I mean...
That's it. That would take down this government. And I wrote my book 20 years ago on this, and no one pays attention to it. But, they even have statutes in for the judicial branches that are the judicial branch of federal judicial that you can challenge all this, but no one's willing to look at it. And that's what needs to be done. This thing's got to be cut cold turkey to shut it down, because it's doing exactly what it was planned to do back in 87? I can't, my numbers are screwed up here. 1787, when they put the Constitution in place. And if you go back and look at what they did at the Constitutional Convention, which was unlawful, it was basically a closed session. They wouldn't let the public in to disclose what was going on. It was secretive. They basically forced it on the states, and technically that was illegal, as like the 14th Amendment's illegal. It violated Section 5 of the Constitution, what they did. Lincoln did a bunch of unlawful things against the Constitution. And this whole government's just totally rogue and unlawful. In its own existence. And it could be fixed, but people aren't interested in doing that because they're so in-depth and loving the Marxism that's been fed to them the last 150 years plus, that they can't get out of it. They're not willing to. And like I said, they have also turned everyone in the states, the 14th Amendment citizens are basically lifted off the country that they live in, which I'm in Wisconsin. I'm an Illinois national because that's what I've declared. But I live in Wisconsin, and basically the people of Wisconsin have been lifted off the land and turned into slaves because they're calling 14th Amendment citizens residents. Not only people that move into the United States are residents, and it says that in the census, the language we were going over. So everyone's a resident, which is a thing identity. So people are, a thing in law is a slave or a property, a res, the res,
like the reservation.
reservation.
I guess instead of
Yeah, they're basically they're a conquered people basically.
I guess instead of the
Indians.
republic, we should say the government all grants us to live on a reservation. I mean, they could take our homes through eminent domain,
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
necessary for the necessary of the government, and now the way things are going with the Rona. It's who knows if people can't pay their mortgages, that the government just nationalizes the banks, and then all of a sudden, you can't pay your mortgage. You can live there. The government owns your house now, but you got to be a good citizen. You got to be a good citizen. You got to keep your social credit score up. Now, I'm not saying this is completely going to happen. I have no idea. I'm just theorizing here. But wouldn't that be the cherry on the top of the boot cake of totalitarianism? End up doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
See, no one's pushing back. I pushed back. I was prosecuted 25 years ago, and I pushed back, and I won because the indictment was fraudulent and a lie, and I won the trial based on facts because it was a fraud. So people aren't pushing back administratively or doing just like the census thing. They're putting up with it, and they're voting, and all these
Yeah.
things make you the consent. They give consent of the governed.
Yeah,
So people
you're
should just
you're
say
buying into it,
we're not doing this anymore.
but it takes enough people to do so. It takes enough people to say, "I've had enough." We'll see. I mean, a third of the people supposedly went on a rent strike because they couldn't pay their rent. So maybe that'll stir more people to say enough is enough.
Yes.
We'll see. We'll see. Because
Yeah.
the United States is on some levels, among other things, a giant corptocracy. I mean, when you have BlackRock, one of the largest investment groups in the world, controlling the Fed injections into the stock market, and the Federal Reserve printer is just like and the printer's just printing money, 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 money. I know it's not that. I know that it's they I think they minted a $1 trillion, I think it was platinum coin for the injection or whatever. It may not have been platinum. I don't remember exactly what precious metal it was that they used. But BlackRock has the control over that, and so again, everybody in the truth movement's saying Trump's got control of the Fed. Trump's the head of the Federal Reserve, and blah 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 blah. No, BlackRock and Steve Mnuchin now have control of the Federal Reserve.
Hmm.
So yeah, good luck with all that.
Yeah. When I came out with my book in 2000, it was 1999, 2000. A bunch of disinformation started coming out, like the Act of 1871, change government, which is horse hockey. But people started looking at that, and then people started saying, "Oh, it's a corporation." Well, it is a corporation. It always was. That's weak and doesn't really tell anything. So what they did with my works is dilute it to the public, so the people started parroting this garbage instead of knowing the truth, like we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
I want to read you a case
Yes, go ahead.
that took place in 1833. Of course, this is pre-14th Amendment, and it's called the Barron. It's Barron versus City of Baltimore, and that's 32 U.S. 243. And Justice Marshall, he was one of the Supreme Court heads at the time, said this about the Constitution. The Constitution was ordained and established by the people of the United States for themselves, for their own government, and not for the government of individual states. Each state established a constitution for itself, and in that constitution provided such limitations and the restrictions on the powers of its particular government and its judgment dictated. The people of the United States framed such a government for the United States as they suppose best adapted to their situation and best calculated to promote their interest. So we the people is not you and me. It's a cabal, and it's an enterprise put together by these people, these elitists of the world, and it's always been that way. And the 14th Amendment made it even worse. They sucked people into the jurisdiction out of the states into the federal government and turned them into slaves. So the slavery issue that the Civil War was fought on is basically a red herring. It was an excuse to do what they did, and I believe they probably set it up ahead of time so they could create even the Civil War. I believe the Revolutionary War was, again, there's that term revolution.
Yep, it was set up from the very beginning,
It was
too.
It was set up to set up this entity, this enterprise called the United States, and do what it's done. This is nothing but a commercial plantation. You were talking about the Indians. They live on the reservation. We live on the commercial plantation. They basically took them, stole their lands by whatever means, and then enslaved the population that came here to live.
Yes, very much so. And I want to make a correction. It was BlackRock was taking over the bond market. They were doing bonds and securities, not the stock market. But they're still being the ones who are handling the Federal Reserve injections, should I say, into the bond market and security
Yes.
markets. So I just want to make that correction there.
Well, see, that all gets back to what we just discussed there about this is nothing but a commercial enterprise. That's all it's ever been. The states have the right to be sovereign, and that's what needs to be done. The United States has to be dismantled, and everything's got to be done over. And it won't happen until people just say, understand this, and say we're not participated anymore.
Yes, but it's going to have to take all of us in a collective effort. Now, Sniff wanted me to ask you, Mr. Bork, what's the difference between people and citizens?
There's the people that I just read out of that court case. If you go to Blackstone's commentaries, he was a jurist from England. The people, that phraseology has always meant the popular representatives. It doesn't mean us or the peasants.
So who represents us
people.
is what you're saying, like our representatives
Yeah,
in Congress.
these people. Well, see, that was changed with the 14th Amendment too. They changed the senators used to be elected in by the states. The people,
Yes.
People of the, I say the people, that's a phrase. People of the states, the so-called citizens, didn't do that. The state did. So this is just a progression. And if you hear the word progressive, that's someone that's moving world communism forward. They just don't know it. You ask a conservative, what's he conserving? They generally can't answer.
No, because they're not conserving anything.
They're
conserving the world order, should I say, is what they're doing.
Yeah, basically, they're just useful idiots for this whole program, this progressive program. That's why I wrote a paper called "Your Marxism," and I said that in there. Not only liberals, progressives, that conservatives are too, because they're all in the same boat. And under the 14th Amendment, especially when they really changed things. Oh, by the way, the Jesuit schools went from like 4 prior to the Civil War to like 40 after.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting. Yeah. So the Jesuit colleges giving us our higher forms of learning and institution exploded after the Civil War.
Right. Yes. And then they put in God we trust in the money, on the money rather, during the Civil War. The so-called people or the founding fathers were supposedly secularist
Oh, we
or
talked about that. Many of them
deist.
were
Yeah.
illuminists,
Right.
um, probably Satanist,
Right.
deist. One of the worst being Thomas Paine. Oh God, have you ever read Thomas Paine?
Yes.
It is. He writes Gnostic liberation theology of the United States in his writings. It's.
Right.
I'm not a fan of Paine.
Well,
Um,
just a few years ago they came out with Common Sense 2,
mhm, mhm.
and this movement is so ignorant that they were pushing that. It's like I didn't really read it or back it, but I can imagine what it was. Because Thomas Paine, like you just said, wasn't a good guy. So why mock or copy his work or even use that verbiage? Because it was bad.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was a
yeah.
sales program to sell the United States, this
And,
entity.
and then we talk about wars and everything with the Civil War and all, and the Revolutionary War and World War One and World War Two, all the wars that, even more wars that the United States has been upon. It wasn't until after World War Two, I guess, to circle back to the Swiss. We have what in the United States what we go under, which is the Geneva Convention,
Right.
and the Swiss
Again in
brokered that.
Switzerland.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the supposed rights of wartime prisoners, or establish
Hmm.
protections for the wounded and sick, and establish protections for civilizations, and yeah. So it's just very interesting that they all come together for the Swiss to quote unquote lay down their arms for certain people. It's very suspicious.
Yeah.
So
Back to
um,
your the question of your chatter or whatever you call them. A citizen is suspicious too. A citizen is a Roman level civil law term, and if you go back to Vattel and the Law of Nations, it was written in France in the 1700s. I believe that was kind of a you know a foundational blueprint or rule book for them that Vattel was probably commissioned to put together. I haven't done deep research on him. That's why I get upset at people not working together, because I'm sure we could get people from France to start really researching this character,
mhm.
as I haven't. But the one thing I noticed in his Law of Nations, he said, I said people that weren't citizens were termed inhabitants, right? Okay, so he said citizens are members of a nation. He didn't say a national, which is basically indescriptive as far as political affiliation goes. But a citizen has political rights. So what they did with that is set up a legal fiction or a presumption that you are a subject are subject to all this law that we talked about. Calvin, he said, they said where the church had cetus or
Mhm.
civilization existed, that they had control over these people with their civil law. So being a citizen made you subject to not the city that you're in or the municipality that you lived in, which citizen originally meant that. It's basically a denizen of a city, right? City
Mhm.
denizen. So a denizen is someone that's given privileges of a certain location, right? So a city denizen is someone that's subject to the private law that city has established, right? So
Yes.
what Vattel did, he established the principle that if you're a citizen, you're subject to all the state law the legislature creates too. So that's basically a totalitarian move, or someone's subject to all this law. So that existed in the 1700s, so it was incorporated into the American system of law. And like we talked about, it went back to uh, Switzerland. And what Calvin did, and they believed and set up. So it ties in there. So a citizen is not a good thing, and that's what my book and research set up, is that we claim nationality, so we're not subject to all this private law. Of course, my whole goal was to get people out of this 14th Amendment system because it was an individual remedy for people, and basically, unless you hurt someone, they can't touch you. The agency system is part and parcel of the Marxist system set up under the 14th Amendment. So every agency is under the 14th Amendment, and that basically that's the new due process they put together that overrides the due process that's mentioned in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And another thing they did with the courts too, England, they turned their courts into chancery courts, which is basically equity courts, and they did that in the United States too with the 14th Amendment. It obliterated basically the common law, which common law is custom and usage law that was adopted sort of or kind of was adopted in a lot of the states from England, and basically it comes from custom and usages and common sense, and they replace that, of course, with this civil law, the citizen law that controls everyone by the legislatures.
Yeah, so I guess last thing to circle back, and then we'll close for this evening. The Geneva Convention is very much used forth and pushed forward by Harvard University. Of course, Harvard University was
Right.
founded by John Harvard, who was a Calvinist, and then you have the International Committee of the Red Cross. Of course, International Committee of the Red Cross was
It
founded
goes
in
back to Switzerland.
Geneva, Switzerland. And then you have the Rohr Jewish Learning Institute, which is a branch or initiative set up together by Chabad Lubavitch. So there you have. So there, all of them together, together to one to push forth the Geneva Convention. So
here's a definition of census, unbelievably, from Webster's 1913, the same year the Marxist Federal Reserve was established, and the 16th Income Tax Amendment, which is plank 2 of the Communist Manifesto. Census, an official registration of the number of the people, the value of their estates, and other general statistics of a country. Again, that's outside the scope of what the original Constitution laid down. That's a socialist-based definition.
So one last question by Sniff, and we'll close, Mr. Bork, and you can tell the fine people where to find you. Is if Virginia is a commonwealth, does that mean it's under control of the British Crown?
No, that doesn't really mean anything. The courts have determined or stated that commonwealth is a state. They're interchangeable in meaning. I believe commonwealth, if you look in international law, basically a commonwealth is tied to another entity, like the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico is under the jurisdiction of the United States. The people there aren't nationals of the United States, but they're citizens of the United States. So it's kind of a mess what they've done with it. But my next book, that if I ever get it written, I was thinking about doing it, calling it the Commonwealth, which is basically, it states in its terminology that the wealth is common amongst all people of that country. So, here I'm fighting against things like the acronym PAC. I started People's Awareness Coalition, but one of my goals by the end of this year, hopefully, and I need everyone's help out there to do this, is I want to steal that acronym away from political action committees, which basically are corporate entities that are stealing the wealth of everyone in America. So the only way we can do that is by, like you said, John, working together and getting that done. So when a millennial like you hears PAC, I want them to hear People's Awareness Coalition.
Not Political Action Committee.
Right. I want to steal that away from them.
And so, Mr. Bork, I want to thank you for having you on this evening. Where can everybody find you? out there in the audience, sir?
Our websites are kind of a mess right now. We're working on them. They had PHP problems, but PAC Alliance is our common website. You mentioned pacandlaw.us. There's a bunch of papers there. If you, I don't know, the most popular one I'd like people to read is PAC Bottom Line. That's at pacandlaw.us/bottom line, all one word. It's a PDF that basically explains what we're about.
Your paper on libertarianism, your paper on
Yeah,
Ludwig von Mises.
there's tons of those, and I don't have those listed. Someday I hope to have that done. For one reason, I haven't put them in a list. If you go to one paper, it gives you a bunch of other ones that you can go to, but I don't put them in a list because freedom isn't free, and it takes a little work to get to everything, is why I didn't put them out. And plus, we're trying to help people, but to get them educated, it takes a lot of time and money. Like I say, the people that are oppressing you, they've got all the funding and all the resources available, and we're sitting here broke, and we can't get anything done. The only way that's going to change is by either a plethora of people uniting and working together, or funding to get it done. And that's another thing I want to see done, is get some of the money that goes to these corrupt politicians and put it in a kitty, so we can all start using that funding to do what we need to do. That's one of my basically mottos, is forget about what they're doing. Let's do what we need to do. We keep an eye on them, but we have to correct ourselves and get things, on the other side of the fence, so to speak.
Yeah, we need to try to get together a group of people that can vet other people and vet other research and work together.
Right.
Because it's the only way we're really going to get anywhere. When we're
Right.
stuck in our digital ghettos out there on YouTube land,
YouTube.
it becomes very difficult.
Nightmare.
Or the internet, it becomes very difficult to share information to people, and people get stuck in their own paradigms most of the time, and no one really ever grows. And then you also have the gatekeepers and the trade shills on top of that. There are genuine people out there. They're just can be very difficult to come by. And people grow on their own with their knowledge base and what they learn and everything.
Yeah.
So
What I would do is I'll have to give you some links. Maybe you can put them in your
yes, I can.
comment section. I can't do that because they took my YouTube permissions away. They gave them back, but I'm shadow banned, as you found out. You couldn't find my post on Adam Green's blog post the other day. So
yeah,
I'll give you some links to give to your people so they can look up the documents.
yeah, it'd be good. All right, Mr. Bork, well, have a good evening. Thank you for coming on.
My book. I forgot.
Oh, yeah, you forgot.
I forgot about that. Sorry. redamendment.net. You can find it there. That site's somewhat working. It's got issues, but you can still see the information there. And we'll hopefully get that fixed in the next couple weeks.
Yes, very much so. Have a good evening, Mr. Bork. Take care.
You too.
I'll be on again soon.
Thank you, John.
Bye. All right. That is it. Hope you guys enjoyed our show. By law, you have to take part of the census. Now, what information that you give, legally, it's supposed to be who lives in your house and their names and even their social security numbers at this point. What you do, information that you give beyond that is up to you. The government may require that, it may not. They may be just satisfied with just that. I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm only telling you what I did myself. So, yes, that is it. I want to thank Mr. Bork for coming on. Mr. Bork will be on again. We're going to do some more shows. I'm going to start a Swiss investigation series, continue with the Mountain Jews investigation, Continue with the Finders. I got a couple of Finders episodes lined up here in the future. Of course, doing more of the exposing the witch hunt narrative, witch hunt in quotation marks. Most of these cases were real, and not too many Corona episodes. I have one coming up with a good friend of mine, Dr. Jonathan Ritz, who's a naturopath in Connecticut. I met him at the Red Pill Expo. He had a booth, and for Apricot Health. So we are going to discuss what can be done for viral prevention, what can be done for overall health, what can be done to maybe help relieve coronavirus symptoms. If you get it, we're also going to discuss terrain theory. We're going to discuss germ theory. We're going to discuss non-native EMF, its effects on the human body, and what can be done to mitigate it. And we're going to discuss exosomes, the exosome theory. Yeah, so it's going to be a good show. I'm looking forward to that Saturday evening. So, yes, if there's anything else that you guys would want me to cover, or anybody who wants me to have on, please let me know. I can't promise that I will have everyone on that you guys want me to. But here and there, I'll try to invite people on and try to get them on. Me and Lee will do another show probably next week. Yeah. Also, don't brandish a gun or point in the face of any government representative or federal agent, please. Do not do that. But anyway, that's it for this evening. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. God bless everyone in the chat. God bless everyone out there. Hope you guys are doing well. Till next time, always read the documents. Good night, everyone.